I used to see ghosts as a little kid, and last night when I was laying in the bed, I remembered why I hate sleeping with my door open. Let me tell you the things that I saw when my mother had a no locked doors, no closed doors policy, and we lived in a very haunted house. As a kid, I shared a room with my sister, and I will never forget the night that I saw bodies form in the dark and walk around my house. Let's talk about it. It was family movie night, and we didn't do this often. My mom really only did this when she had niggas coming over and she was trying to impress these niggas. They weren't niggas, actually, they were Hispanic men, and she was really fucking with them. That's besides the point. My mom wanted to get it on, so she sent me, the youngest, upstairs, and she told my sisters, y'all have a couple of more minutes and then y'all could go to sleep. My sisters never came up to bed. Okay, it was just me. So I went upstairs and I was like, okay, I went to brush my teeth, and as I was brushing my teeth, I was hearing footsteps in the hallway and also like in the room, brother's room, and I would always hear spirits in my brother's room at this time. If you're new to my page, you probably don't know that my mother was a medium and that my family practices heavily in our ancestral spirituality. So seeing spirits was nothing new to me. However, I ain't never seen no shit like this. Turned off the water, I was hearing a lot of shuffling. Like people who weren't walking normally, they were like kind of dragging their feet. And I was like, what the heck is that? So I remember I laid down in my bed, and because my sister's bed was first, I knew nobody could get me first, but she wasn't there. So they were going to get me, whoever they were, they were going to get me. So I laid down and I was so scared to like have my back, to the door. So I decided to try and cuddle up, try to go to bed with my face facing the open door, which was pitch black darkness. And so as I'm laying down and my eyes are closed, I'm really scared. I did not like to sleep by myself. I want to preface this by saying I was only like 7. I was like probably 7 years old at this time. So as I was laying down, I heard a shh in my pillow. And at first it was really quiet, that I thought I was dreaming this. It was like a shh, shh, shh. And the last one woke me up. And when it woke me up, I just opened my eyes. I opened my eyes and I looked around my room, and there was nobody in my room. And I thought that it was kind of like my mother telling my siblings to be quiet, like, shush, be quiet, shh. And so I sat up and I listened. And I think that this is where I went wrong, because I don't think that I should have responded to what I heard, because if I didn't respond to what I heard, I don't think that any of this would have happened. Laid back down and I started hearing a tapping in my pillow, like a tapping that was getting really annoying. So I flipped my pillow and I laid my head down really hard. But when I did that, my beads hit my eye. So I kind of went like this, like that. And I opened this eye. When I opened this eye, I made direct eye contact with just pure darkness in our hallway. And as I was looking, I started to see movement. And I'm thinking, oh great, like my sisters are coming to sleep. The only thing is my sisters were kids at this time, just like I was. We were not like this tall. Oh, yeah, I'm getting scared. I kept looking. I was like, what is that? As I was looking, it started to feel like the darkness started to become really grainy. Like, how old movies look? And you're like, why the fuck do old films look so grainy? I kid you not, the darkness outside of my door looked hella grainy. And all of a sudden, I started to see like an arm form. And then I started to see a pair of eyes form. And then another pair of eyes. And then another pair of eyes, until it was a group of eyes. And these people start forming. They start fucking forming. And in my pillow, I am still hearing, shh, bitch. You cannot trick me. I was getting really fucking scared. Really, really, really fucking scared. My black ass is supposed to be asleep, so I can't leave my room. It's not that I can't leave my room because I was supposed to be asleep. I can't leave my room because that's where they're at. Who that lady over there in the chair? What fucking lady? They're right there. They're right there. And so I called out and I was just all like, Mom! 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 Nobody was answering. People kept coming closer. They kept coming closer until I started to see their hands grasp my wall and grasp the door. And it was so scary. There were hands all over my door, until my sister turns on the line. She's like, Nina, are you okay? From my sister's perspective, this is so crazy. She always says, you were sleeping when I came into the room. That was not a dream. I visibly saw her come into the room. I saw these people and I saw these characters. That was one of the scariest things I had ever seen in my life. And my sister told me, she was like, I didn't hear you scream or anything. I just wanted to come check on you because that was such a big girl move. Like, you went to sleep by yourself. If I was 7, that means my sister was like 11 turning 12. So that was crazy. I loved how like in tune me and my sisters were. We still are, but yeah, we're just not close anymore. But that was some scary stuff, and thank God for her.
I listened to the story, and let me just warn you, maybe don't listen to the story at nighttime. Look at the title and decide, maybe we should listen to this in the morning. So the guy telling the story says that ever since he was little, he was always afraid of the house that they lived in. He doesn't understand why, but he just always was. When he was 6 years old, he explains that his parents decided to get a divorce. His mom ended up keeping that house, and obviously he would go from the mom's house to the dad's house back and forth. However, even now that he's an adult, he doesn't have good memories of that house. Every time he tries to remember, it's always a memory of him being scared there. He did move away from home when he got older, and he says that the house is still there. It belongs to him because his mom did end up passing away. And anytime he visits his hometown, that is where he stays. He did eventually try to rent the house, but nobody ever wanted to rent it. But he says that he's okay with it because that house now became a spot where him and his cousins would go and stay, and they didn't have to get a hotel or things like that. He said that it had been around 2 to 3 years that he hadn't gone back to that house, but this January, his cousin Marisela said that she was going to take a trip and asked if she could stay there, and he obviously said yes and said if he can go too because he hadn't seen her in such a long time. She was going to go with her son Luchito, which by the way was his favorite, so he was so excited about it. They were actually going to get to the airport around the same time, but that didn't end up happening. She was going to end up getting there around 3 in the morning, and he got there a lot earlier than she did. So when he gets to his house, he ends up going into his own bedroom because it was smaller than the main one, and he wanted his cousin to have the main one with her son. He explains how Luchito was 6 years old and he was such a sweet kid, so he was excited to see him. He had already fallen asleep when he got awoken because he heard them get into the house. He heard when they walked into the house and actually heard when Luchito started running all over the place like he typically did. He decided that he was gonna pretend to be asleep when he heard Luchito opening the door to his bedroom because he wanted to scare him. He says that he guesses Luchito had the same idea because he started walking very slowly towards the bed, but he could hear his agitated breathing because he had just been running around, and then he heard when Luchito went underneath the bed. He decided that he was going to go along with it as if he didn't know Luchito was under the bed, just to see how long it would take for him to start laughing. He says that he could even hear Luchito already laughing a little bit, but like trying to cover his mouth so he wouldn't get caught. So as he's laying there still, he said that he decided to say out loud, "Ugh, I really need to use the restroom. I hope there's nothing underneath my bed that grabs my legs when I get up." After saying that, he says that Luchito was laughing, but like you could tell he was trying to cover his mouth, but he just couldn't contain the laughter anymore. He finally opened his eyes and he sees that his phone has a notification. When he gets it, he says that it's from his cousin, and the cousin is telling him, "Hey, we just got into town, but we stopped at a taco stand. Are you awake? Do you want anything to eat?" He explains how the text that he had gotten was like from 3 minutes ago, and he's like, what the fuck, because he could still hear the breathing from underneath the bed. So he decided to text her back and says, "Are you still there right now?" She responds back, "Yeah, we're still here. We're actually at the taco stand at the corner of your house. Do you want us to take you something to eat?" This man did not waste any time. When he read that, he stood on his bed. He leaped as far as he could to that door of his bedroom. He left the house and ran all the way to the taco stand. He was running through the street in his pajamas until he got to the taco stand, and he sees his cousin and the kid there. There was actually another lady there who had given them the ride, but that was one of his cousin's friends, and they were just, eating together. He says that when he gets there, they just laugh, but they didn't even question him as to why he's in pajamas, why he's barefoot getting to the taco stand. Like, they didn't ask any questions as to what the fuck, why would he come with no shoes and in PJs. He says that he told them nothing. He didn't tell them what had just happened back home, but it was more so because he was embarrassed because like her friend was there and he had just gotten there barefoot in PJs and they weren't asking why, so he just didn't say anything to them. Luckily, he didn't have to stay in that house alone. They both had left the house at the same time to go to the airport after a few days of being there. He says that he hasn't gone back to that house, so it's literally there alone as it's always been, or at least he thinks the house is alone. If my cousin let me stay at that house after experiencing that and not tell me anything, you're a good cousin, because what the fuck? I don't want to know unless I experience something. That's a you problem. It's in your room. It's under your bed. What the fuck? Because he says that it was like giggling when he was like, "Oh, I'm gonna go to the restroom. I hope nothing grabs my legs." What the fuck was that? He does end the story saying that he's terrified because this year he is gonna have to go back and he's gonna stay there alone for 6 days. I'd be getting a hotel. I don't know. What do you guys think that was? What if he was like half asleep? No. There's no way. He heard them get in there. He heard when the door opened. He heard when something went underneath the bed. He heard when I was laughing. I'm so fucking scared right now. I cannot.
It is time for another spooky story. If I am going to be scared, you are going to be scared with me. I am Autumn in Appalachia. Send me your spooky stories. Add me on Facebook and subscribe on YouTube. Same handle. Without further ado. This story was submitted by, let's call her Marie. I'll tag her on TikTok, but I don't know her actual name. She told me a Ouija board story that happened to her mom, Brenda. It's bone chilling. So Marie said that at some point in time, I'm not sure when this happened, Brenda, her mom, is interested in the occult and she decides to buy a Ouija board. Now, Brenda waited to use this Ouija board until her husband, Marie's dad, is at work at night. So nighttime comes, she's home alone, she pulls the board out. Whatever comes through this board over and over again begins spelling out like, let me out, wanting to be let out of the board. And Brenda obviously is freaked out. She is refusing to let it out of the board, but stuff started happening around her, like poltergeist, paranormal type activity. And she is freaked out. She ends the session, and later on in the night, her husband gets home and they go to bed. That is when all hell breaks loose. As they're laying in bed sleeping, Brenda is suddenly woken up by feeling the bed shaking. Now, at first, it's not super intense, and she actually thinks it's an earthquake, so she goes to shake her husband awake, and for some reason, he will not wake up. This was not like him, and they still don't know how to explain it. Now, this bed shaking intensifies. It gets to the point where it is like so violent that it is actually starting to jostle the mattress off of the box spring. Brenda is terrified, out of her wits at this point, and eventually the bed, like the mattress, flies off of the box spring, and the motion of that causes her husband, who still will not wake up. She is fully shaking, like yelling, wake up, he will not. His unconscious body like rolls off of the mattress, lands onto the box spring, still sitting in place, and the mattress at this point is in the floor. Brenda does not know what else to do. She ends up calling her next door neighbor, who just so happens to be Marie's stepmom, and she is like, get over here, like, I need help. So she comes over. Both women are trying to wake him up at this point, and eventually he comes to. Now, they realize that like nothing else in the room, in the house, is shaking. It was solely the bed. And Brenda just is like, hey, like she spills the beans, explains that she had been using a Ouija board, and she really thinks that is the reason for this happening. So the dad is like, nah, screw this, bro. He throws the Ouija board out. So they ended up moving out of this house. Now, over the next few years, they moved quite a few times. From the context in which Marie shared the story, it sounds like her mom and dad at some point split up. Her dad gets his own place. She's like a teenager at this point. Her dad gets his own place. She moves in with her dad full time, and then just on weekends, whenever she wants, she'll like go stay with her mom. So one weekend, she's at her mom's house. Marie is sitting in her bedroom. The closet door is like ajar, and Marie's just sitting there in the quiet looking at this closet door, and she gets this really intense gut feeling that she needs to like open the door and look in the closet. So she does, and to her horror, that Ouija board, the same one, is sitting on the shelf in the closet. She panics. She tells her mom. Her mom flips out. She is like, how in the Kentucky fried hell? She throws this Ouija board out again. Marie goes back and checks the next day. This Ouija board is back in her closet, same spot. And she's like gaslighting herself. She's like, did my mom really throw this out? Like, did I actually see her throw this out? And she's like, no, like she had to have, like she's terrified of this thing. And she does not know how to explain this thing like spawning again for the second time. So Marie, at this point, she's just like freaking out. She doesn't know what to do because she, like throwing it away is doing no good. It keeps reappearing. And so she decides she is going to bury this thing in her mom's closet. And what I mean by that is she says like every box, every piece of clothing, every little thing that she can put over top of this Ouija board to ensure that her mom literally never finds it again. That is what she puts this Ouija board under, in the closet. She leaves the house. She goes back to her dad's. Her dad's like, did anything interesting happen this weekend? She's like, nope. Doesn't tell anybody. A month later, when she goes back to her mom's house, you already know, it's in the closet again. And she, from this point, she doesn't tell me like what she did, if she did anything, if she just gave up. She just kind of sums this story up by saying she doesn't know whatever ended up happening to that Ouija board. At this point, she's a full-grown adult. She's not seen it in years, but to this day, she still experiences on occasion paranormal activity, and she truly believes it is whatever was in that board that came out of that board. Apparently, it didn't need permission to be let out. Y'all, that is one of the creepiest Ouija board stories I have ever been sent. And Marie knows this sounds crazy, but she swears this is a true story. This really happened to her family, and her family has been like plagued and haunted by it ever since. Over in this dusty corner of the internet, we are believers. Y'all let me know what you think in the comments. Send me your spooky stories, and stay tuned for the next one.
What would you do if your daughter kept telling you that she's seeing another mommy standing in the hallway at night, and then one night you hear it? This is Scared with Jess, and today's story is about a woman who says that her daughter saw something in their house, and it wasn't her. My daughter was 4 when she started talking about the other mommy. At first, I thought it was one of those weird little kid things you're supposed to handle carefully so you don't make it worse. An imaginary friend or a bad dream, overtired bedtime fear. She had just started sleeping in her own room all night more consistently, so when she began asking me to leave the hallway light on, I didn't think much of it. And then one night when I was tucking her in, she looked past me toward the door and said, "The other mommy stands in the hall when you're asleep." I laughed a little at first, not because I thought she was being funny, more because my brain still wanted it to be harmless. I asked, "What other mommy?" And she shrugged and pulled her blanket higher. And then she said, "The one that comes out when you're not looking." That sat with me for the rest of the night in a way I didn't like. The next morning, she acted normal. She ate waffles and she watched her cartoons, and then she asked me where her glitter shoes were, so I let myself brush it off. And then it kept happening. She mentioned the other mommy only at night, always in this calm little matter-of-fact way that kids have when they don't understand why what they're saying is upsetting you. And one night, she said the other mommy only stood in the hallway and watched. Another night, she said the other mommy smiled first and then came closer. I asked what she meant by that, and she showed me. She lifted both hands to her face and sort of pushed her cheeks and mouth like she was fixing something into place. And then she smiled, and that made my whole body go cold. I asked why she did that, and my daughter said, because that's what the other mommy does before she talks like you. After that, I stopped laughing anything off. I started checking the hallway after she fell asleep. I checked the windows and the locks in every room in the house. I told myself I was being a good mom, just making sure there was nothing she could actually be hearing or seeing. Shadows, coats, or a chair. One of those little things kids turn into monsters at night. And there was never anything there. And then one night while I was brushing her hair after her bath, she asked me something I still wish I had never heard. Very casually, like she was asking if we had apples left, she said, "Why does the other mommy ask if I'd still know you without your eyes?" I put the brush down so fast it caught in her hair and made her yelp. I apologized immediately and told her I was sorry, that I didn't mean to, but my hands were shaking. I asked when the other mommy said that. She said, "Last night." I asked what else she said, and my daughter thought about it for a second and then said, "She said you don't need them to smile." I did not sleep that night. I sat in the hallway outside her room until morning with every light on in the upstairs part of the house. I told myself I was overreacting, and at the same time I could not make myself leave that spot. The strange part was that my daughter never sounded terrified when she talked about it. Uneasy, yes. Reluctant to sleep sometimes, yes. But never hysterical. It was like she had accepted that this thing was part of the house and I was the one struggling to catch up. A few nights later, I finally asked her what the other mommy looked like. She said, "Mostly like you." I asked what mostly meant, and she looked confused and then said, "Her mouth is still practicing." And that was the first moment I actually felt sick. Not scared in the abstract, but actually sick. After that, I put a camera in the hallway, but there was nothing. 3 nights of empty footage. Just the hall, the nightlight glow, and my daughter's bedroom door, our bedroom across from it, and no movement or shadows. I almost started feeling stupid again. Then on the 4th night, I woke up because I heard my own voice in the hallway, soft and right outside my bedroom, saying, "Come here, baby." For a second, I genuinely thought I was dreaming, and then it happened again. My voice, same tone I use when I'm trying not to wake her too much. "Come here, baby." My husband was out of town that week, so it was just me in the house. No TV on and no audio in the hall. I sat up and looked up at the bedroom door. The gap under it showed the hallway light still on, and then I heard my daughter's bedroom doorknob move, and that was what made me get out of bed. I opened my door and looked into the hall, and at first I thought it was empty, but then I saw her, a woman-shaped outline standing near my daughter's doorway. Not fully lit and not fully dark either, just enough shape to tell where the arms were, where the head was, and where the body was angled toward the bedroom. And her hands were up at her face, both of them, fixing it, adjusting something I could not see clearly from where I stood. And then she lowered her hands, and in my voice she said, "She listens better when you sound tired." I don't remember running to my daughter's room. I just remember being there, scooping her up out of bed so fast she started crying from the confusion of it, and backing into the hall with her in my arms while staring at that shape. The thing did not rush me. That was the worst part. It just stood there at the end of the hallway with my outline and my voice and my face I somehow knew I did not want to see in full. And then it smiled. I know it smiled because the shape of the head changed around the mouth before the rest of the face did. I took my daughter downstairs, locked us both in the laundry room because it was the only room with no windows, and I called my husband first, and then the police. Yes, I know how insane that sounds, but what was I supposed to say? There was something in my hallway pretending to be me? I couldn't think clearly enough to care. The police came and they checked the house, but there was nothing. No broken lock or window, and no sign anybody had been inside. One of the offers gently suggested my daughter had a nightmare, and I panicked after hearing something in my sleep. I nodded because I needed them to leave if they were not going to find what I knew was there. I didn't let my daughter sleep alone after that, not for weeks. And then one afternoon, she was coloring at the kitchen table like nothing in the world had ever gone wrong, and she drew our hallway. She drew her bedroom, and she drew me standing outside it. And then she drew another mommy at the far end, the same hair and nightgown. But the eyes were blacked in with marker until the paper tore, and the mouth was huge. When I asked why she made the other mommy's mouth like that, she said, because she smiles before she gets yours right. And that night, I checked the hallway camera footage again. I went back through the exact same time from the night I heard my voice. And at first, it looked empty. And then I slowed it down. At one point, for less than a second, my bedroom door opens. I step into the hallway, and at the exact same time from the far end of the stairs, another version of me is already standing there, just for a frame, and then gone. I still have that clip. I have never shown it to anyone but my husband. And even now, my daughter is older and doesn't talk about the other mommy anymore. But sometimes when I pass her room late at night, I still get the feeling that if I look all the way down the hallway too quickly, I'm going to catch someone fixing my face with both hands before she notices I'm watching. Anyway, good luck sleeping tonight.
Submission to Spooky Scary Storytime comes all the way from South Africa, and it's from someone named Nakatula, and she says that her brother spent 11 years in prison for a crime he did not commit until he requested that she visit a Sangoma, which, as I understand it and as she explained to me, is essentially an energy healer, and they work through divination and cleansing rather than like wizardry or magic. Eventually, her brother's conviction was overturned, but it didn't come without a cost. Brother, Sipo, always says that prison teaches you two things: how to wait and how to tell the same story over and over and over again. And that's what he did for 8 years out of his 20-year sentence. He repeated the same story about what happened and how he got to be there. And the essential takeaway was that it wasn't his firearm. He admitted that he wasn't completely innocent. He said that he had been there that night, the night that he and two other boys from their township, as well as his cousin, decided to climb into a car and go to a local bottle store where they were going to rob the shop owner. And he was aware that there was a firearm. He swore was that he was not the one that pulled the trigger. He said that his cousin, who she requested I call T for this story, he was the one that pulled the trigger. But the robbery went wrong almost immediately. There was shouting, there was a struggle, the shop owner resisted, and a shot was fired. And the shop owner passed away before he even reached the hospital. Everybody took off, but the police eventually tracked everybody down and made arrests. But all of a sudden, the story changed, and T made a quiet deal with the police. And what that deal was, nobody really knows for sure, but all of a sudden the story changed, and T was no longer the shooter. He was no longer responsible for the death of this man. He was simply a witness, and he said that Sipo was the one that pulled the trigger. At the end of the trial, Sipo was convicted of murder and received a 20-year sentence, while T walked free. And she says that her mother never fully accepted this. She also really didn't know what to believe, but the truth was that he did help plan the robbery and he had gone along with it. He just said that he had never intended for anyone to actually get harmed. And so everybody that knew him struggled with this conviction and what to believe. She says that's why she thinks he kept repeating the story to anyone who would listen, because he needed someone to believe him. But by year 8 of his sentence, their mother had passed away and she was the only one who was regularly still visiting him. That's around the time he got moved into a new cell. And his new cellmate was an old ancient man named Amalabeni. South Africans, I know y'all are here and you're going to come for me for these pronunciations, but I'm doing my best. Sipo said that Amalabeni looked older than the prison itself, and he had this long beard, and he had cloudy white eyes, and he had hands like gnarled tree roots. And at first, they barely spoke, and Amalabeni didn't give him the time of day. Nobody even really knew why he was there to begin with. But one night, he finally asked Sipo why he was there, and so Sipo told him the story. And then he told him again and again and again. Week after week, he would just repeat the same story. And eventually, Amalabeni knew every detail. And so one night, he just stopped him, and he was like, Sipo, you've told me this story 100 times. He was like, yeah, because it's true. And the old man says, no, it's because you think somebody owes you something. Sipo later told his sister that he didn't know what that meant, but it stayed in his head. And a few weeks later, Amalabeni gives him a folded piece of paper, and on it is the name of a local Sangoma. All he said was that this was a woman from my village, and if you want peace, you should ask your family to go and visit her. And so when Sipo asked her this during a visit, she actually laughed at him. She said that while her family does honor their ancestors, they're not deeply traditional. They go to church and You just don't think about things like that. And so when he asked her, she like stared at him and she was like, you really want me to visit a Sangoma? He's like, I just want you to go. She's like, for what? He's like, I don't know. And she was like, well, then why should I go? And he was like, I'm just really, really tired and I need to get out of here and I need people to know the truth. So she says she went because if it could bring him peace, then she was going to do what she could. And so when she visited the homestead, it took like an entire day to get there, but it wasn't what she expected. It was just an elderly woman living on a hillside that overlooked some land. She says that when she arrived, she didn't expect much, but she was shocked because this woman walked out of her home and knew both her and Sipo's names. This woman had no way of knowing that she was coming, but she went inside and the woman asked all kinds of questions about their family, about their cousin, and the robbery, and then she performed divination and she laid out bones and small objects on a mat and studied them carefully and then performed some type of ritual, which out of respect, she said she won't go into detail about because she truly doesn't understand what she was doing anyway. Afterward, she says she sat silently for several minutes and then says, your brother is not carrying the dead man. She said she didn't really understand what she meant, so she said, what dead man? And the woman says, the one that was shot. And she says, well, what do you mean? He doesn't carry him. And she says, he is not following your brother. He says, who is he following? And the old woman looks to the hills and she says, the one who carries the lie. She says she remembers every word that this old woman told her because they frightened her. And then the woman gave her instructions and said, bring me soil from your mother's grave, bring me one of Sipo's shirts, and return in a month. That was all. And when she returned a month later, there was nothing dramatic that happened. It was literally just a prayer said with names mentioned and requests made to ancestors. Also in this prayer, she said they made acknowledgments to both the dead and the living, as well as an acknowledgement of truth. Ultimately, she says the entire thing felt less like magic and more like a conversation. When it all ended, the Sangoma simply said, now leave it to rest. And that was it. And life went on and months passed, but eventually they received word that their cousin T had gotten ill. Was very sick and nobody could explain it. Doctors couldn't find a root cause, but his hands were shaking and he struggled to walk. And she tried her best not to think of this Sangoma, but then Sipo got sick too. He had headaches, numbness, and balance problems, and prison doctors diagnosed him with tremors during an examination. And when she visited him, he looked frightened and he said, what if the Sangoma got it wrong? And what if she took it out on me instead? What if whatever was sent to T came for me? And she says that she actually felt frightened and she wondered about that too. Because she didn't fully believe it, but the timing was too odd to ignore. And a year later, T passed away. He was only 40, and the diagnosis shocked everyone because they had found out that it was a rare neurological disease, a kind that most people have never even heard of. But then the doctors started testing everyone else in the family for genetic markers, and they tested Sipo too because he was still struggling with his undiagnosed illness, and they had never found a logical explanation for that. And it came out that he ended up having the same genetic markers for that same rare inherited neurological illness. So the disease had been in their bloodline all along. T had inherited it, and so had Sipo. Several distant relatives carried markers for it too, so the disease wasn't transferred or sent by an outside source. It had always been there, hidden and waiting. The strangest part came later, about a year after T died, when a pastor contacted authorities. A lawyer became involved because T had spent the last few months of his life confessing to anyone who would listen, to doctors, to nurses, to churchgoers, to the pastor, to anyone in the village who had a spare moment, because the guilt was eating him alive about what had actually happened that night. He was the one responsible for pulling the trigger, and he had even left written confessions and voice recordings. And in every version, he admitted the same thing, which was that he was the one that discharged the firearm. It wasn't Sipo. By then, there was enough evidence to reopen the case, but the legal process took years, and eventually Sipo's conviction was overturned. After 11 years in prison, Sipo walked free. But a few months after he was released, he asked his sister to drive him somewhere, and she said she immediately knew where, and he wanted to go to the Sangoma's house. It was another day's drive, but as they got there, she noticed that the Sangoma looked exactly the same. And Sipo said he just wanted to thank her, and then he asked her, did you do this? She's like, do what? And he said, the illness and the confession and everything. And she says, do you still think this was about punishment? And he says, well, then what happened? And she says, the truth happened. She says, your cousin carried guilt that belonged to him, and you carried sickness that belonged to you, and the dead carried truth that belonged to them. He says, I didn't do anything. Nothing was exchanged. Nothing was stolen. He says nothing was sent from one person to another. And he says, then what changed? And she says, what was hidden was brought to light. Petula says that she's not sure if ancestors were involved, and she's aware that skeptics will say that this was just coincidence. She doesn't know if the ritual changed anything, but what she does know is that for 8 years, her brother told the same story, and then she was given a name. She visited that Sangoma. The man became ill, and the guilty one died while the innocent one was freed. The truth eventually came out, and she says, you're free to believe whatever you want, but that is the story exactly as it happened. She said it was fine if I could use her real name, so she'll be seeing the comments. Let her know if you have thoughts. And if you have a spooky, scary story time you think nobody would believe, or about something that still unsettles you, please send it in. We would love to hear it.
Let's read a scary story. This one is titled, I Saw a Picture of Me on the News Today. Just a trigger warning, this story has a brief mention of self-unaliving. I'm hiding like a pest. It's cold in this hotel. I doubt there's any other guests staying here. Not at a place like this. There's a horror following me, a parasite that devours anyone close to me. It bleeds them dry until some sickness takes hold of them. It will kill everyone around me. I don't know how long it's been here with me. I remember how sick my family used to get during my childhood. What was it doing? My best friend in elementary school, dead from pneumonia. It was because of me. My father is the family I grew up with who is still alive, but barely. His body will fail. He's not going to get any better, not with me. No one around me gets better. And now he's frantically trying to find me, running around the city. He puts up posters. He's called everyone he knows, but eventually he'll stop looking. I hope he gets to read this one day, but not today while I'm still here. Don't know what it is. The thing that's afflicting me. I've seen it. Maybe I've always seen it. Maybe I've locked eyes with it as a barely conscious baby. Maybe I convinced myself that what I was seeing was imaginary, looking at me from across the playground. It's a ghost. My ghost. I truly knew it when I was just a teenager. I was trapped in my room in sleepless nights, and it was there, blocking the door. I'd pretend to be asleep, staring glances at it standing there. Just a dark silhouette watching me. Eventually the sun would come up and I wouldn't see it anymore, but it was still there. I shined a flashlight at it one night. I saw pale green skin and a bloated, unwashed body. I was too scared to scream. I just curled in my bed and let it watch me. I cried all night and left for school when the sun came up. I must have looked strung out as a kid, but I guess it's understandable when your brother's dying. It's gotten angrier recently. I've been so lonely, I don't know what it wants. I don't know what I can do to stop it. I can't talk to anyone about it. They see me with pity. They think I'm broken. They think my ghost is self-inflicted. They go on and on about their coping mechanisms and their dissociations and their feelings of control. It's not true. I know this is real. I see him looking at me every night, and it's getting angrier. They can't understand that my ghost has caused so much sorrow. They sit there with their medical diplomas in inviting offices and refuse to believe me. A few months ago, I tried to fight my loneliness. I've been a recluse for years now. I just isolate myself away from everyone. I can't work. I can't get my own home. I didn't interact with my dad anymore. He's gone through so much, lost his wife, 2 kids, and me. He's starting to get sick by now, I know it. I started talking with some people online. They were friends, we played video games together, and they lived far, far away from me. My ghost is getting relentless. A few nights ago, I opened my eyes from bed to see it standing over me. It was looking down at me. Its head was right above mine as it started to ooze its pain. I looked at its face and saw dark, empty holes where a person should be. It started screaming at me. It was so loud it was coming from everywhere. It was so loud I had to get away from it. I jumped out of bed and ran out of my room. I still heard its screams coming from across the house as I stormed out the front door, and as I walked away, I looked back to see it glaring at me from my window, still screaming. I heard its wailing as I stumbled around the neighborhood in the dark. Every pebble stabbed my bare feet. I was freezing in my pajamas. When I came back home at sunrise, it was still in my room, glaring at me with those hateful eyes. I saw it in full light, a discolored, hairless body, bloated and deformed, with a shriveled head. It had a massive, empty, hateful eyes with a mouth that it couldn't keep closed. It stopped screaming. It's mad at me, at my isolation. There's no one I can go to stop this. There is no one that would believe me. I'm not insane. My ghost is real. It's watching me write this across the hotel room. Its face lit up from the streetlights outside the window. Its eyes filled with anger. That day, one of my online friends got really, really sick. They were in the hospital. The doctors recommended thinking about end-of-life care. I know my ghost did it the night it looked satisfied. I can't do this anymore. I left the house and I haven't been back since. I used the money I could find to get a bus to the other side of the city. I've been here in the hotel ever since. In the morning, I'm taking a bus to a town 4 hours away. There, I'm going to walk into the wilderness I will never walk away from. And eventually, I will pass out there. I don't know which one of us will kill me, but it's what I deserve from all the pain I've caused. 17 is the number of people close to me who have gotten sick and passed away. My mother, my 2 siblings, my grandmother, 5 friends, 2 classmates, 2 teachers, a coworker from my summer job, a pediatrician, a therapist, and 1 online friend. I hope one day they can forgive me and that the ghost who stole my opportunity for a life, I hope it will die with me. Let me know what you think's going on, and if you have any scary stories of your own you'd like me to read, just send me a DM.
I could not make this shit up if I fucking tried. I could not make this up if I tried. My man was driving my truck across the train tracks. And let me explain to you, it's kind of hard to explain because it's like a really weird area. There's an overpass, and then underneath the overpass, there is a side road, right? And this is the main road. There's no stop signs on this road where the train track is, where you go over the train track. There is stop signs where this bulldozer was, and then on the other side. So he's going across the way, right? He's going across the railroad tracks, and apparently this fucking bitch on the bulldozer, city worker, by the way, city worker on a city vehicle, plows into him and shreds my fucking truck bed. How the fuck? So I haul ass up there because I'm like, I literally just got this car that I'm in right now, and I switched the insurance on that, and I was like freaking out. But the guy had admitted fault. He was like, there's no fucking way that he couldn't, because I mean, there's no fucking stop sign. He just came out when he shouldn't have. So he was like, oh, I'm sorry, man. And he was like, give me some fucking space. And he was, oh my God, he was so fucking upset about it, right? So he's like, it was my fault. It was, yes, bitch, it was 100% fucking you. The cops get there. He's like, it was my fault, blah, 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 whatever. And I get there. They obviously have to take my information. I had just switched my fucking insurance over, but they didn't take my insurance. So I don't know. I'm like, whatever. I mean, it's not like my insurance is not going to have to fucking pay for it because it wasn't on it. I wasn't at fault in any way. But the police officer, as he's standing there, I mean, they were chill. It was fine, whatever. But I was like, I really want to be cussing this motherfucker out, because can you imagine if this would have been on the other side? Like if he was driving, and I know that it's not higher up, and I know that it didn't hit a door, but imagine if this hit a fucking door. Like the driver's side door while he was fucking driving. So the police officer is like, this is a different situation because one, it's a bulldozer and it's the city. So the claims are different or whatever, but they're definitely going to pay for it, and they usually do it pretty quickly because they just like to do it and get it over with. Why? Why do they like to do it and get it over with? Because you think that I'm not going to fucking sue you? Please tell me, do I have a case? Tell me. Because the way that I want to sue these pieces of fucking shit and tell them you're going to fucking pay us and then you are going to do more training for your piece of shit fucking workers, bitch. Because he was driving with the thing like up, and that's what shredded that. He was like, there wasn't anything in it. Like, I don't even know why he was fucking driving with it up like that. I said, but also, how fucking fast was he going? You know what I mean? I'm actually, that I think about it, I'm shocked that it didn't fucking pop a tire. It hit just right. This is crazy.
When I was 15, we went camping as a group into the mountains with my friend's dad. There was 6 of us total, and the campsite wasn't remote. There were many campers around us, and there was a ranger like 10 minutes down the road. First night was pretty typical. We cooked hot dogs by the fire, we told scary stories, we stayed up super late. I think it was around midnight my friend said that he saw a flashlight moving through the trees. We all looked over, eventually it disappeared, and then the dad said that it's probably just another camper, which made sense because we were surrounded by them, so we didn't think much of it. About an hour later, we saw it again, and it's not like it was moving towards us, it was moving in like a circle, slowly like around our campsite, like they were intentionally showing it around our campsite, just in a circle. One of the guys yelled out hello, and as soon as they said something, the flashlight turned off. That should have been the end of it, right? So we all went to bed that night, and then we woke up the next morning, and we found footprints, and the footprints weren't by the fire, it wasn't by the picnic table, it was directly behind each of our tents. It was like somebody went and walked our campsite after we all went to sleep. And after that, the dad got a little uncomfortable and he's like, okay, we're all like gonna stick together really close, right? And then the following night, again, we stayed up pretty late, and around 1 a.m., we saw the flashlight come back through the distance. The whole night, we were all anticipating, secretly kind of watching the tree line without talking about it, right? So the flashlight turns back on. Anyways, it was doing the same thing, same circular movement going around our campsite. So the dad, he got up, he turned his flashlight on, and he started to walk towards it, and then the light turned off. He was gone about 20 minutes searching, and then he came back super irritated because he didn't find anybody, he didn't find anything. The third night is what I really think about, because we were asleep in our tents, and around 3 a.m. is when I started to hear whispering, and the whispering was outside of the tent. Literally, again, like somebody was circling my tent. Super creepy. I was terrified. I didn't want to unzip my tent, so I just sat there, and eventually it stopped. But the next morning when I got up, I felt like it was weird. Like there was like a weird tension, and it was like I wasn't the only one to hear this. And gradually throughout the morning, each person would talk about how they heard the whispering. It was like me, and then another person, and then another. Even my friend's dad heard it, so we wound up packing up that morning and we left. So we were driving down the road, there was a gas station. We stopped at the gas station, and the ranger was there. So my friend's dad was talking to him on the inside, and then when the dad came walking out, he had an expression on his face. He definitely seemed a little bit pale, and he told us that the ranger asked where we'd been camping, and my friend's dad told him where we were camping, and the ranger said, was there a flashlight? And then the ranger went on to say that they've been getting reports for years about this flashlight circling campsites and the whispers and everything that we experienced. And my friend's dad, he said, did you ever find out like who it was? And what the ranger said back is what really gets to me, because he said, we've never found the person, we've only found where he was standing.
Welcome back to I'm a Nurse, and I used to work at a haunted nursing home. Here are my stories. And for today's story, I'm actually not going to tell a story about my previous facility that I've been telling stories about. I actually have a story about my current facility, and this just happened to me the other day. So I've been working at this place as of recent, and unfortunately, we did have a resident recently pass away. What's really interesting is I don't know these residents. I don't know any history of the building. It's a fairly new building, I can tell you that much. However, myself and another one of the employees were standing and having a conversation in the corner of one of the hallways. And all of a sudden, like off to my left and kind of behind me where the hallway continues to run down to a window, I heard what sounded like somebody taking footsteps but dragging their feet. And that actually, like right off the top of my head, I said, oh, that sounds like somebody with Parkinson's trying to walk. So I quickly turn and nobody's there. And I turned back to my coworker and she was like, you heard that too? And I was like, yeah, that sounded like someone with shuffling footsteps. And her and I kind of started like, oh, wow, we've got ghosts, haha. But then she made the comment about the individual that recently passed, and that person had a history of Parkinson's and used to walk all over the place. So, quite funny. We were like, huh, that was odd. It gets better. So, I was off today, and while I was off, I am sitting at home minding my business, and I checked my phone and I received a text message from that same coworker who wanted to inform me that another employee today, who did not hear the story, I didn't tell anybody about it, she didn't tell anybody about it, actually told her at one point, came to get her and was wondering if any of the residents was not in the dining area. And she said, no, everybody's there. Why? And she said, well, because I could have swore that I heard somebody walking in the hall. She was standing in the exact same spot that we were yesterday. So very, very interesting. it's been a little while since I've had an experience. So the fact that this happened, and it's such a new facility, and we just recently had someone pass, and that person was in fact someone that would have made those types of footsteps had they been up walking around. It's kind of mind-blowing. So yeah, that was a fun one. I know it's been a while since I posted. Unfortunately, I've just been super busy. My schedule's been all over the place. I'm trying to kind of get back into the swing of things, but I will give you another little snippet of my haunted nursing home stories, and I'll tell you just one little quick one. And this is a story that myself and multiple other people experienced. At the back door of our nursing home, when we worked there, the back entrance was where all of the staff came into. And one night, I was standing there with someone else. We had just come in from a little smoke break and chit chat. And out of the corner of my eye, there was a stairwell and like a window on the door. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw what looked like a woman in like a long nightgown or a long dress, like as if they were on the stairs turning to go up the next flight of stairs. And I like stepped back. I looked through the window. There was nobody there. I opened the door. Nobody on the steps. After I mentioned that to a couple of other coworkers, I was told that that's a very common occurrence, that there is a woman that walks up and down those stairs, and many people see her, and everybody would go and investigate, and there was never anybody there. So hope you guys liked both of those stories, and stay tuned, and I will continue to bring you guys as many stories as I can. Also stay tuned. I still don't have the definitive date for the podcast that I jumped on, but as soon as I know, I will make sure that I post and promote that. So if you're not already following, give me a follow, leave me some comments, do all the things, and I will catch you next time. See ya.
You want to hear some scary shit? Well, let's go back to San Antonio, Texas. Within the past few years, we have seen an increase in paranormal activity in the sky, or extraterrestrial activity. Over the past few years, there has been an increase on the neighborhood apps of pictures and videos with unexplainable sky phenomena, be it a flying object or plasmas, especially in the Randolph area. And that area has an Air Force base. Rumors started swirling around that they had actually captured someone, something, and that San Antonio had become its own Area 51. An anonymous official stated that they had actually captured a tall gray, who was quite unruly and had a bit of a temper. Now, allegedly, this gray escaped, and they had been looking for him up until 3 years ago, when the Spurs signed a 7'4", 7'5" basketball player by the name of Victor Wembanyama, whose skill, agility, and speed were superhuman. Fans started swearing that they would see his fingers stretch around the basketball to make those impossible shots, even giving his teammates some superhuman powers of themselves, crazy fast breaks, and verticals that defy physics. Coincidence? Maybe. Or did San Antonio make contact first? And do we have our very own Monstars? You know, like the Space Jam movie. And allegedly, these aren't the playoffs anymore. It's the War of the Worlds. Now, usually, I'm not one for conspiracy theories. But with the incident that happened at the mall in Miami or Orlando, and what we've seen in our skies here, I don't know. What do you think? Either way, I'm on the side of the aliens. Go Spurs, go.
Have you ever heard talking or laughing or weird sounds while you're in the shower? Now, believe it or not, a lot of people have had paranormal experiences while in the shower. And I think it's because you have to understand that is when we are the most vulnerable, right? We're unclothed. We are not really focused on anything. And we sort of can't see anything around us. And I think when you have an encounter in the bathroom, it's usually something negative. Now, this is a story that comes out of Chicago. There was this young girl who lived with her roommate, and she said one day she's at the house, she's taking a shower, and said all of a sudden as she's washing her hair, she sees a hand come around the curtain, and it's like moving. And she thinks this is her roommate who's just like messing around with her. So she starts slapping the hand and is like, "Stop it, get out of here, I'm trying to shower." And when she gets out of the shower and goes to see like what her roommate wanted or what she was doing, she realizes her roommate isn't even home. So she, is like, okay, that was really weird. Like maybe I don't know, was imagining it. About 2 weeks later, she once again is in the shower. And as she's taking a shower, she can see the shape of a man standing behind the shower curtain. And, she's terrified. Like, I don't know what to do. Like, what do I do in this situation? So she grabs the shower curtains and pulls them over, and there's no one there. Several other times, she would be in the shower and, like, she would hear someone talking, or she would get the feeling that someone was touching her back, and she would look around and there was no one there. So this kept happening, and she, wondered, like, why is this happening to me? And, like, why doesn't my roommate ever experience this? Until one day she's going out of her house and she talks to the neighbor. And the neighbor says, there used to be a young guy who lived here, and he dated a girl that looked just like you. And it's crazy. The young guy, he was in the shower, he slipped and fell, hit his head, and passed away. This invisible line that sits 37 degrees north of the equator, and it essentially divides the United States into the north and the south. Now, the thing about this imaginary line is the places that it runs through. It is known as the Haunted Highway because this line goes through Area 51, right? It goes through Roswell. It goes through the Four Corners region, which has been synonymous with skinwalker sightings. It cuts through the Ozarks, right, which is an epicenter for paranormal activity. It goes through Monmouth Cave, right, which is known to possibly be this subterranean city that exists in these caves that span thousands of miles. Now, it also cuts through the heart of the Appalachia and into Washington, D.C. Now, the eerie thing about this is if you look at all of these UFO sightings, these major events that have happened along this line, it also passes through the New Madrid Fault Line. And I've started to notice a lot of these places in the north, or in the Four Corners region, where they are seeing these skinwalkers, they are seeing them in the same place in the Appalachian Mountains along the 37th parallel. Now, some people believe this is some type of metaphysical type of ley line, or possibly a tear between dimensions of space and time, and that this attracts sort of these interdimensional beings or evil or negative energy. Now, this is a story that I heard that takes place along the 37th parallel. There was this man named Chuck. Chuck said one night he was driving from Roanoke to Knoxville, Tennessee. He said he was on Interstate 81. It was like 10:05 at night, and it was a completely clear sky. He said as he's driving in his car, he all of a sudden started to feel kind of weird. And he said he almost like went into this daze. Well, he pulls off the interstate and he starts driving down this back highway. Then he gets off onto this dirt road. And eventually he finds himself in the middle of the woods driving down this dirt road high up in the Appalachian Mountains. And he starts to think, like, what is going on? Like, how did I end up here? Like, what made me get off the interstate and drive out into the middle of the woods? So he stops his car and he finally gets a hold of himself. And he's like, all right, how do I get out of here? Like, where do I need to go to get back on the interstate? As he's sitting outside of the car, he notices it's completely quiet. There's no bugs, insects, no sounds of the summer, like nothing. It is quiet. When all of a sudden he hears doo 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 doo, like this music, and it was coming from the woods. And it was just very soft and very faint, but he could hear it. And he's like, there is nothing around here. Like, where is that music coming from? And that's when he felt like there was a presence in front of him. And he said it felt very large, it felt evil, and it felt menacing. He could not see it, he couldn't see anything but the woods, but he could feel something was standing behind the car next to him. So he slowly gets in his car, he closes the door, and he locks it. That's when he started to feel vibrations in his car, like something was, stepping really hard right behind him, something big. So he proceeds to start his car up and drive down this road. When he looks in his rear view mirror, he could see something was following him. Even though like he couldn't physically see it, it was like he could feel something was chasing him. So he starts speeding, and he's going as fast as he can down this dirt road. That's when all of a sudden his radio turns on by itself, and it starts playing the same song that he hears out in the woods. So he's freaking out now, like, I need to get off this road, like something's going on. He tries turning off the radio, the music won't stop playing. And that's when he looks in his rearview mirror again, and he could see the outline of something very large, probably 9 to 10 feet tall, moving behind his vehicle. And he said the next thing he knew, he looked forward, and he found himself 90 miles away, now in Knoxville, Tennessee, about 5 blocks away from his home, sitting in his car. And he still to this day has no idea what happened to him, outside of the fact he was driving on the 37th.
His friend claimed that she could see ghosts, but he never believed her until one night years later. She's my longest and oldest friend since 5th grade and has always claimed she is a psychic medium who can see and talk to ghosts. Everywhere she went, she said she could see them. Sometimes they're just shadows, sometimes just a presence, and sometimes a full-blown apparition. The one I remember most was a ghost named Jim, or something like that, who was an old man who she would see in her closet. Not malevolent or anything, but to me that was creepy as hell. But she always seemed unfazed. As a kid, I believed it, but then grew out of it and assumed she did too. I moved states away and we didn't see each other for a couple of years until I went to visit for the summer and reunited. We were sitting in the living room watching TV and catching up when I popped the question jokingly, "Any ghosts around?" She said there were a couple, but the one that caught her attention the most was an old lady outside my mom's bedroom. Yeah, right, I was thinking in my head. I'm a firm believer in science, psychology, and logic. I also believe that the human brain is powerful and loves to play tricks on us as projections of our own fears. I've always taken people's experiences with a respectful nod and a grain of salt. I humor her and ask her for details. She says she's some older woman from Texas. She might be related to my mom and I, and she's Native American. I realize that this brief description fit my dead Nana, but it's probably a coincidence. We're in Texas. Everyone has a dead grandma, and she knows my mom is part Native. I ask her specific questions, and she gets them all correct. The name of her husband, how long I knew her before she died, and the gift she gave me as a baby, and which of her children are dead or alive. My final straw was when I pointed to a portrait on the wall with her kids and asked her which one of these girls was a party goer and always got in trouble, and she got it right. At this point, I'm properly spooked, but I'm still in denial. I've known her for a while. Is there no chance she stumbled across an old picture album or overheard a conversation with my mom and I about her? Hell, what if I told her myself and just forgot? We've known each other for 8 years. There's no chance I've forgotten some conversations from then. She then tells me there's another ghost who is a man who wants to communicate. So I ask him a variety of questions, pushing aside my slight unease as I'm thoroughly entertained by this whole ordeal. Either she's lying and really committed, and I want to see how far I can push her, or she's telling the truth and we're actually talking to a ghost. When did he die? What did he do when he was alive? I even jokingly asked what his type was and if he was single. We stopped talking for a bit and are messing around on our phones in silence, looking down and not in each other's peripheral vision. I suddenly get this inexplicable chill on the right side of my neck, which I ignore. chalking it up to some kind of breeze or mental thing. It was so minuscule and obsolete to me, I had no reaction and didn't even look up from my phone. I will say it felt different than a usual chill. It was almost concentrated, like something icy pressed against me. Then she looks up at me and verbatim says, "I just got an image of him touching your neck." She mimics the motion, and it's the same side and spot right beneath my jaw. My heart sank to my ass. The sheer coincidence of the placement, the action, and the previous shit before this, I was genuinely so freaked out. And while it's not as major or scary as other people's stories, it's enough for me to question my beliefs. I still am kind of a skeptic. I chalk most things up to just being figments of our imaginations, but I take people's stories more seriously now. A lot of people who fake being mediums and psychics usually do it for attention or money, but my friend gets nothing from it. In fact, she has a very much annoyed, just ignore it attitude. This is what makes me think she might not be lying. She doesn't want anything from it, and actually doesn't want to talk about it a lot. She's not trying to creep anyone out at all. She's not trying to get internet fame or scam some people into buying a palm reading at a little table. It's just something that she lives with.
A series of spooky stories, except for it's tell me the most unhinged thing your mother-in-law has ever said to you. Part 3. These are from my comment sections. The biggest regret in life was coming to our wedding because we served alcohol. God forbid. My mother-in-law had family photos and I was there with my partner, her son, not married yet, and our 3 daughters. I was standing there with him and our kids and she told me, "Oh, we're just doing the family for now." I was like, okay, cool. And I got the kids to move. "Oh no, the girls can stay. They're family." What? Because how are you going to consider my kids family but not me? The kids that came from me are family, but not the person that they came from. After we got engaged, my mother-in-law told my fiance that we weren't allowed to have children because they would come out ugly and that she didn't want my low-status family bringing her down. Did you rock her fucking shit? My mother-in-law blamed me for her son getting arrested and then said when he gets out, she's going to convince him to leave me. But for 7.5 years before the incident, I was the perfect daughter-in-law. I need to know the backstory. What the fuck happened? Why did he get arrested? When we told my mother-in-law I was pregnant, she said, "I thought so, you're getting a little thicker around the middle." I was 6 weeks at the time and an Australian, size 6. I don't know who gave these fucking women the audacity and the gall, but the fact that there are no consequences to their funky ass fucking words is insane to me. When my son was a week old, we ended up spending overnight in the hospital with him. My mother was with me. Got back to my mother-in-law having cooked breakfast for her son and husband and told me she wanted a family-only breakfast. This was in my house. I packed up the newborn and my mother and went to breakfast on our own. Where's your husband? Sorry? When I lost our twins 13 days apart at 4 months pregnant, my in-laws showed up at my house unexpectedly. Apparently no one told my father-in-law what was going on, and when he asked why I was so pale and upset looking, my mother-in-law said it's because she had lots of regrets. It's not a sentence that I would use in conjunction with a miscarriage of twins at 4 months. She always hated me and the feeling was mutual, even though I showed her a tremendous amount of respect. Why? Why the fuck would you do that? Why? Why the fuck would you do that? I would have beat her fucking ass. Or, at the very least, screamed at her. When I got guardianship of her great-granddaughter, she asked me if I had any plans to adopt any more strays. You, lady, are about to catch some strays. Rubbed my stomach, saying, "I don't know how I feel about you carrying my grandbaby." After we got done burying his grandma, she said that she wished that it was my mom. I was in labor. She said I better have her before midnight because bike week starts tomorrow and we won't be around for a week. We lived right behind them. Whoop her ass and then take her to jail. My mother-in-law made plans with my brother-in-law to stay at my house the first 2 years my husband and I were married. Pardon? No, my brother-in-law didn't live with us. No, she didn't stay with us. She slept on my brother-in-law's couch the first year and his neighbor/our friend's spare room the second year. She showed up at our new place the next year, uninvited. Different state than the previous 2 years. Both places were a different state from where she lives. Now she's not allowed to have our address. Who the fuck invites themselves? 2 years, bitch? Hell, you ain't getting 2 nights.
2 hours. Get the fuck out of my house. When I made a suggestion about an inheritance given to my husband that she was trying to get her hands on, she told my husband to tell me I better shut my mouth because I'm not even family. We'd been married for 15 years, together for 20. I was also standing right there. 4 weeks postpartum from a C-section with 2 toddlers, and I told my in-laws that I felt crazy because they were expecting me to cook for them 4+ nights a week already, and they seemed to think that it was such a normal expectation. She sat there eating my food, not even looking at me, and said, "Sorry you feel so crazy." Bitch, you think that I'm gonna cook you my food 4+ days a fucking week? 4 weeks postpartum. Let's put the 4 weeks postpartum from a fucking C-section aside. I'm not cooking for you fucking bitches 4+ days out of the fucking... You are not my kids. Y'all are grown-ass adults. Bitch, get the fuck out of my house and go cook for your fucking self. Ex-mother-in-law told me that I had legs 2 days after an emergency C-section, and after she made me walk up 3 flights of stairs because I had her son get me a drink. 3 flights of stairs. Bitch, I could barely get up out of fucking bed after mine. 3 flights of fucking stairs? Kiss my ass, I will shove that hoe down 'em. Called me Little Miss Muffet sitting on a tuffet because I wouldn't do the dishes. I was 6 months pregnant and went into early labor, so I was put on bed rest and was told to not stand longer than it takes to walk to the bathroom from my bed. Little Miss Muffet's gonna get her musket. Pop, pop, bitch. Before we were married, my mother-in-law called me Meg twice. This is my husband's ex-girlfriend. Also spoke Spanish on the phone, so I couldn't understand, saying she never leaves, and complained to my now husband that we spent too much time together. We're happily married and she and I have since healed, but we keep visits to a minimum. It's just so weird to me that these mothers complain about their sons spending time with their significant others. I mean, I get because they want it to be them, like in every way possible, but it's still fucking weird. Nurse went to get my husband because I was hemorrhaging after the birth of our daughter. Mother-in-law intercepted the nurse and didn't tell him so they could go out to eat while I was getting an emergency hysterectomy. I swear to God. Oh my God. This one? I've had it with these bitches. Come back for part 4.
My friend claims that she's in a time loop, and I think I actually believe her. It was 12:50 p.m. when Rebecca Collins stood at my door, and when I opened it, she dropped the bombshell right away. I'm in a time loop. Lasts from when I wake up at 7:30 a.m. to 12 a.m. And her tone seemed so matter-of-factly that it almost didn't seem human. And when I started to question her, like, what are you talking about? She said, the password for your Reddit account is GMEF3773. You ate bacon and pancakes this morning. Like, how would she know that? I low-key started to believe her. Like, what the hell, Rebecca? She said, you gave me your password in one of the previous cycles. And I started to tell her that you don't... She cut me off and said, sound like myself? Yeah, I've experienced this day around 8,532 times. Give or take a few. Of course I'm gonna be different. That number sounded like it was at least like 20 years. I ended up though just slamming the door in her face and she gave no reaction at all. And then I pondered her claim on the couch for a few hours because, I mean, she had to be right somehow, right? Like, how else would she know all the things that only I knew? But that meant so many things. Like, Rebecca was only 18 years old, so that would mean that her time in the loop outlasted her time before. So was she even Rebecca anymore? You know, or was she like the ship Theseus, you know, parts of her mentality aging and changing until nothing like her remained? But like, was there even a way to escape the loop? And right as I reached for my phone, a text notification lit up the screen from Rebecca that said, no, I do not know how. I've tried 8,500 times. Not even death works. I mean, she sounded like a robot. Her phrasing devoid of humanity. Then she texted, I've kept myself occupied with learning things. Keeps me sane. I mean, how much did she learn? 20 years seems like a lot of time to study. And what happens in 100 more years of the loop? You know, does she become omniscient? Does she learn how to escape? Like, what happens if she runs out of things to learn? You know, because knowledge is not infinite, but time is. Like, what can you teach a man that knows everything? And what happens after 12 a.m. hits? You know, what if she never escapes the loop? What happens after? Does she simply pop out of reality? Does something else replace her? And if she does escape somehow, is she even mentally human anymore? At this point, it was 11:58 p.m. and she picked up my FaceTime call. She knew I wanted to see what comes after. Of course she does. She stood perfectly in front of the camera, almost like in automation. The clock struck 12 a.m. and she instantly disappeared. It was just like the flick of a switch. Then the screen went black. I looked out my window and all I could see was the same blinding darkness. I turned to the door, but it wasn't there. Then I felt something inside of me hit the floor. It was my intestines. And then my abdomen was gone too. Then the room, then my body, and I fall through darkness eternally. You're the lucky one, Rebecca. You still get to exist.
Why are we not talking more about the national parks and the creepy stuff that's been happening there? If you look at a map of all the disappearances that have happened in this country, they are in or near a national or state park. Now, we're not just talking about disappearances. People are having encounters with these unearthly things. We're talking people finding bodies strung 80 foot up in a tree, decapitated. We're talking footprints the size of cars. We're talking entire populations of elk found mutilated or just to have completely vanished. So what is going on in the national and state parks across this country? Now, there was a story out of the Superstition Mountains. There was this group of friends. They decided they were going to go camping for 3 days. On their first day, they get to Apache Junction and they get on this trail. And as they started to hike, one of their friends, who they called Dale, started to act very anxious. Well, the thing about Dale was he was very tough. He had served 2 tours in Iraq. He wasn't scared of anything, but he seemed visibly shaken by something. And so they asked Dale, "What's wrong? Why are you seeming like you're afraid of something?" Dale says, "I don't know what's going on, but I get this feeling like I'm being watched and something is following me. And I can't describe it, but I am just terrified." And so the further they hiked into this trail, the more anxious Dale got. Now, it got to a point where it was visibly noticeable, and he could not contain himself. So they asked Dale, like, should we turn around and go back to the car? And Dale's like, "No, I'm good. Let's go camping." So eventually they make it to their campsite, and towards nightfall, Dale decides he was going to go to bed early. And he tells his friends, I'm gonna call it a night. Maybe in the morning I'll feel better. So he goes to sleep. A couple hours later, everybody else goes to their tents and they fall asleep. Well, they all simultaneously have the same exact dream. In their dream, they see their friend Dale. And he's being dragged by this hairless, pale white creature through the desert. He's screaming for them, screaming for help, and there's nothing they can do. So they wake up, only to discover that their friend Dale is missing from the tent. All of his stuff is still there. His boots, his backpack, his water. He is nowhere to be found, though, in any of the tents. So they get up and they start searching for him. And they look through this entire area, yelling his name, shining the flashlight in every crevice, every hole. They cannot find Dale anywhere. So after a couple hours, they decide to call it for the night. And in the morning, they would search again. So after they sleep for like 2 or 3 hours. They wake in the morning. And there comes Dale walking into the campsite. He is badly bruised and scratched up, and he looks very, very rough. And they asked Dale, "Where have you been? We've been looking for you for 9 hours." And Dale says, "I don't know. In the middle of the night, I got up to use the bathroom, and the next thing I know, I was walking into the campsite, and it was morning." And so they instantly decided to call it quits. They got back in their car, and they left. A couple months later, Dale went to the store one day and just disappeared. And still to this day, they have not found him. Now, there was another story out of Yellowstone National Park. There was this group of friends who decided they would hike for 6 days. They were going to go to one of the more secluded campsites. After 2 days of hiking, they are walking down this trail. They started to hear what sounded like someone crying. And as they got closer, they could tell that it was like a female who seemed very in distress. So they followed the sound of these cries, and it leads them to this cave. And they could tell that this sound was coming from within it. And so, thinking that someone might be in danger, they decided to investigate. So they go into the cave, and as they get in there, they said the crying just completely stopped. But they didn't want to give up. They thought there might be someone who was hurt in this cave. So they continued to walk down these various chambers and tunnels. And that's when they said they started to hear this music playing. Some kind of like 1920s, 1930s swing music. It sounded like a record. And it was coming down this one tunnel. So they head in that direction. And they come out to this room. They said in the room there were all these backpacks. There were t-shirts. There were shorts. And it looked like a little bit of a bunch of different people's stuff. But they couldn't find where the music was coming from. Well, right at that moment, their flashlight goes out. And it is completely dark. They cannot see anything in front of them. So they started to try and feel their way out of this cave. They sort of remembered which direction they had come in. And they thought maybe they could figure their way out. Well, as they're walking this cave wall, slowly moving across it, one of the people in their group all of a sudden feels something. It felt almost like snakeskin. It was cold, it was slimy, and it felt very muscular. As they kind of moved their hand down, it almost had the shape of a human. The next thing they know, they couldn't move. And they realized something had a hold of them. And so they struggled and they fought as hard as they could. And eventually, whatever it was, it let go. And as they walked further and further away from where this area was, they looked back and they see this set of eyes just staring at them. Eventually, they did make it out of that cave. But they felt like there was something dark inside there. Now, this next story comes out of Joshua Tree National Park in California. So there was this park ranger who happened to be driving down one of the roads. And off in the distance, he said he noticed what looked like some kind of flame. And his first thought was, oh no, there's a forest fire. So he speeds off in this direction. He parks his truck and he gets out. And as he approached this thing, he said it became apparent that it wasn't just a flame. It was a person inside of a flame. And as he got a little bit closer, he could see this person was completely hairless. He was pale white. He didn't have any eyes. But somehow this fire was emanating around him. And he said he just hovered there for 4 to 5 minutes. And then it was like he lifted up and sort of drifted away off into the sky. And that has been one of the many sightings in this national park known as the Fire People. So what do you think? What is going on in the national parks across this country?
The next night, sometime after midnight, I heard the garage door opening beneath my room. My bedroom sits directly above it, so the sound vibrates through the floor. I immediately thought my brother had gone somewhere, so picked up my phone to shoot him a quick text and ask if everything was okay. I double-checked his location to see if I could figure out where he was headed, but it showed that he was across town. While I was coming to this horrible realization, my boyfriend sat up beside me and said, "You heard that too?" That's when we both froze. Because if neither of us had opened the garage, then who did? My boyfriend got out of bed and went downstairs to check. The second he reached the first floor, the dogs completely lost it. They were freaking out. They were in pure panic. And one of the dogs that usually hated my boyfriend was circling around his legs, whining desperately like it wanted protection. The others were crying and whimpering in their cages, desperately trying to find safety somewhere else. He said the entire downstairs felt wrong, different, like it was charged with something. And once again, he felt the same presence nearby, watching him from somewhere he couldn't see. The final night was the worst. Everyone was finally home. Me, my boyfriend, my brother. I remember thinking maybe whatever was happening would stop now, that the house felt normal again. Surely it couldn't target all three of them at the same time. I was wrong. While we were all upstairs, I heard it. A car door outside opening and then slamming shut. And then again, over and over and over again. Terrified, I looked through the window. But the driveway was completely empty, except for my car and my dad's truck. No movement, no people. The sound continued, though, echoing through the night so loudly there was no mistaking it. Open, close, like someone was getting in and out of the cars over and over and over again. The next morning, I woke up feeling sick with anxiety, and I felt deeply uneased. I was sitting on the couch texting my boyfriend at work about everything, when suddenly I got this overwhelming feeling that someone was standing directly behind me, reading over my shoulder. I spun around instantly, but there was no one there. That's when my boyfriend texted me back and started telling me about what he had been experiencing while he had been staying with me. The woman in the car, the feeling outside, the dogs, all of it. That's when we started to wonder if whatever this thing was possibly attached to me. I took it to the point of even contacting my best friend's mother because she was deeply religious. She told me later that while praying for me, she suddenly developed a migraine so intense it made her physically sick the entire day. Eventually, I tried and prayed for myself. But when I tried, I physically couldn't speak. The words would not come out, and it felt like something was standing in my doorway staring at me, like it was stopping me. I remember my chest tightening and my throat feeling almost locked shut. But after a few moments, I forced myself to try again, and this time I was able to speak, and the second I was able to finish, the heaviness around me lifted. The silence felt normal again, and after that night, everything stopped. No more voices, no more garage sounds, no more shadows. It was all just gone. But sometimes, late at night, especially when I'm alone, I still get that feeling that somewhere far off in the dark beyond the trees, someone or something is there, watching, waiting for me to notice it. This story was sent into my email, and if you have any ghost stories, paranormal encounters, or scary stories that you want to share, you can send them to the email in my bio.
Might have known the story of real-life boogeyman.
I was never actually alone in my childhood home. I need to tell you guys this ghost story. This story was sent into my email, and if you have any ghost stories, paranormal encounters, or scary stories that you want to share, you can send them to the email in my bio. Growing up, the house my family lived in always had a strange atmosphere. It's hard to explain. Nothing looked unusual. It hadn't been abandoned or some creepy old building, but from the moment you walked through the front door, there was a feeling, especially upstairs. It always felt like someone was there, watching, just out of sight. Every trip to the bathroom at night felt like a race. Every time I walked up the stairs, I'd get this overwhelming urge to turn around because I felt absolutely convinced something was right behind me. After a while, me and my family got used to it. It became normal, just part of living there. But pretty soon, strange things started happening. One day, my mom was walking home from the supermarket when a friend recognized and stopped her. "Why isn't your daughter at school today?" she asked. My mom had laughed and said, "What do you mean? I just finished dropping her off this morning." But her friend shook her head. "No, I just waved at her. She was sitting in her bedroom window." My mom was understandably confused and a little freaked out. I wasn't at home. She had dropped me off at school that morning. I was sitting in a classroom right then, miles away. Yet, apparently, someone was sitting in my bedroom window. Someone who looked enough like me that a family friend was convinced it was me. A different afternoon, everyone was out of the house except for my brother. He was upstairs when he started hearing a loud banging noise coming from downstairs. Over and over and over again, bang, bang, bang. He said it sounded exactly like the lid of my mom's metal bread bin slamming shut repeatedly. At first, he assumed someone had come home, so he went downstairs to see who was there. But when he got down there, the house was completely empty. The bread bin was untouched, as it had been when we had left it, and the banging he had heard stopped the moment he reached the kitchen. My other brother, one evening, was walking down the hill toward our house, and as he got closer, he found himself looking up towards his bedroom window. And that's when he saw someone standing there, looking out of the window back at him. He was absolutely certain somebody was inside. He assumed one of us were home, but when he got there, the house was empty. It had scared him so badly that he refused to go back inside, and he sat outside waiting for the rest of us to come home. Then things started disappearing. Weird things like cooker rings and cutlery and random household objects. We'd spend days searching for them, and then weeks later we'd find them in the freezer. Nobody knew how they got there, nobody admitted moving them, and it happened so often that eventually it became a running joke. Whenever something disappeared, we'd blame a ghost we named George. A fork missing? George. Something moved? George. George is at it again, we'd laugh. At least we did at first. One afternoon, my mom and her friend Lynn were sitting in the living room talking. The conversation had turned emotional. They were speaking about another close friend who had passed away, and about Lynn's baby boy, who had also sadly passed away. The room was quiet and filled with heavy emotions when my mom noticed that the room was freezing, and she said as much to her friend, "It feels cold in here." She stretched out her hand, and another hand appeared out of thin air. Disembodied, a singular hand, it reached out and held my mom's hand for only a moment, and then it was gone. After that, things calmed down for a little while, but when I was around 10 years old, my brother woke me up in the middle of the night. He told me to go downstairs. When I got there, my mom was sitting in the living room, and she looked shaken. I asked what was going on, and she simply said, "Nothing, we'll talk about it tomorrow." A little later, her boyfriend arrived. Nobody would explain anything to me, and eventually I just went back to bed. The next day, some of my mom's friends came over. At one point, my mom asked me to run upstairs and grab her cigarettes, and as I came back down the stairs, I overheard part of the conversation, and I wish I hadn't. My mom was telling them what had happened during the night. She said she'd been sleeping, when suddenly something woke her up. Someone was grabbing her face, and as it did, she heard a voice right beside her ear. "You bitch." Not long after that, my mom decided to bring a medium into the home. The medium immediately focused on my mom's bedroom. She performed prayers and then pointed to a mirror that my mom had received years earlier. The mirror, she said, was acting as a portal. She instructed my mom to cover it and move it immediately. The medium also claimed the spirit we'd nicknamed George wasn't dangerous at all. She believed that George was actually there trying to protect us. After all of that, during my teenage years, I would regularly experience sleep paralysis. And it always followed the same strange pattern. I'd wake up, unable to move, unable to scream, unable to even turn my head. Then I'd hear the voices. Multiple voices, people standing around me reciting the Lord's Prayer over and over and over again. I would squeeze my eyes shut, trying to force myself back to sleep. Then I'd wake up again, and the voices would still be there, still reciting, still surrounding me. Finally, when I was 17, I moved out of that house. I'm 35 now, and in all those years since leaving, it's never happened again, not once. My mom always believed that the reason for everything traces back to her playing with the Ouija board when she was a teenager. She doesn't think she properly closed the session. She's convinced that whatever answered her that one night never really left her. And after everything we've experienced, maybe she's right.
Imagine the main suspect being caught on camera in your case and people still don't know who he is. This is 24-year-old Jennifer Kessie, and not only is she a wonderful person, but so is her family. They are genuinely just good people. The week before she went missing, she was on vacation with her boyfriend to the US Virgin Islands. When they came back, she stayed the night with her boyfriend, and then the next morning she drove straight to work. She lived in Orlando, Florida, and I believe her boyfriend lived in Tampa, Florida. So this was a bit of a long distance relationship. They couldn't just hang out every night. So every day when she drove to work, she would call her boyfriend to have a conversation. But the night before, they had had a bit of an argument because the long distance was starting to wear on the relationship a little bit. So the day is January 24th of 2006, and she is on her way to work, or supposed to be on her way to work, and she normally calls her boyfriend to have a conversation. But that morning she doesn't. And her boyfriend just kind of chalks it up to, oh, she was in a meeting today, so she probably didn't call. But as he tries to call her throughout the day, she does not answer. Then about 11 o'clock on January 24th, her work calls her parents and says, hey, Jennifer never showed up to work. Do you know where she is? Her parents were immediately alarmed because this is not her normal behavior. Now, her father had spoken to her the night before on January 23rd at about 6 p.m. She had then called her boyfriend that same night on January 23rd, the day before she went missing. She had called her boyfriend at about 10 o'clock, and that's when they had had a little bit of an argument because of the long distance starting to wear on their relationship. Now, her family immediately knew something was wrong, so they started driving from Tampa, where they lived, to Orlando, where Jennifer's condo was. And that same day, they called police and they looked inside her condo, and it did look a little bit messy in her bathroom, like she had gotten ready for the day and then left. But other than that, everything seemed to be normal. Her family also immediately started handing out flyers to see if anybody had seen where she was or knew where she was at all. And the police at first kind of thought that maybe she had left on her own accord, but her parents were like, no, there's no way she did this. So they really fought for the police to start looking into her case. Shortly after, an investigator was brought onto the scene to start questioning people and looking at the evidence. Then on Thursday, January of 2006, there was a car that was found abandoned in a parking lot that was, and I'm seeing so many different sources. I don't know if it was near her apartment or around her apartment, but there was a car found, and it was Jennifer's car. Now, this was in an area where police had often found stolen cars, so it wasn't the best area. Now, inside the car, they did find several of Jennifer's personal items, but it did appear as if the car had been wiped clean. But they did find some DNA on the steering wheel. So they did find a surveillance camera on the property, and it did show the person who parked Jennifer's car and then walked away. The very unlucky part, though, is that this camera only took pictures every 3 seconds, and every time this person was caught on surveillance, they were walking in between the bars, or their face was covered by the bars of the gate, so they couldn't make out a description. This is a cold case, and after several years, there was another officer that looked into it, and he questioned one of the housekeepers that was working at, on the property where Jennifer Kessie had her condo. She did mention a name, but it appears as if that person has been ruled out. And anyone else who has any information, it has been ruled out. Now, Jennifer's family was looked into, her boyfriend was looked into, but he was ruled out. They even looked into some of her coworkers at the place that she worked, and obviously at the place she worked, coworkers. But either way, they looked into her coworkers, and it did seem as if she did have one coworker who was interested in a relationship with her, but Jennifer was against workplace relationships, so she had denied that. But again, he was ruled out. There is so much more information about this case online, and I highly suggest you look at it because I could just go on for hours at this point. Just recently, her family did sue the Orlando Police Department. They wanted all of the information that they had on her case so that they could start their own investigation. They won that lawsuit and currently have all the evidence in Jennifer's case, and they're still looking for her. Like, they still want answers, and they're desperately searching for them. So as of right now, her parents are in charge. Well, I don't know if they're in charge of the investigation, but they are looking into it independently, and it was also given over to the FBI. Now, there is a couple of documentaries that appear to be coming out. One is expected to be released this year, so I'm really curious to see that because I'm sure we'll find a lot more information now that her parents have the investigation files. So if you have the time, look into Jennifer's case because I promise you'll be reading and listening and looking for hours because it's absolutely mind-boggling how someone so young and vibrant can just disappear. And how unlucky is it that this man's face was, you know, hidden by these bars? Like, we could have had him years ago, but nothing. Anyway, what are your thoughts on this case? Let me know down in the comments and follow for more true crime.
I buried my husband, but 10 years later, I saw a familiar figure that sounded and acted exact same like my late husband I buried 10 years ago. It was almost as if I was seeing a ghost. Story time. So I've been married to my husband. We have got 3 children together. They were very young. One day, he said his goodbyes because he was going to work. I was happy. I hugged him and I kissed him. And then he left. Not even up to 4 hours later, his friends came to the house. They told me that I needed to sit down because they need to deliver some news. I was worried. I was concerned. I didn't know what was going on. And I sat down. I pleaded with them to tell me if everything is okay. They told me that my husband was involved in a serious car accident and he didn't make it to the hospital. They also told me something very shocking that I wasn't expecting, that they would advise that I shouldn't go to the morgue to see his body because of the state that he was in. I trusted his friends and I took their advice, so I never did. Weeks go by, the funeral, the burial was all done. But then, that very night that we buried my husband, his family came to the house. They kicked me and our children out of my husband's house, telling me that it belongs to their son, it belongs to their brother, and I must move out with my children because after all, they are not even sure if those children belong to their late son. I was surprised, I was shocked because the burial just happened. I'm still mourning my husband, and the family are too busy fighting for something that they never built. Truly, they kicked myself and our children out of that house, despite the fact that I also contributed towards that house. I was so broken to the point that I could not even fight. I had no energy. I had no strength left in me to fight. So I left. We slept on the streets. I started washing clothes for people. I started fetching water for people. I did odd jobs here and there. And God being wonderful, I met a stranger who blessed us with some money, and I started my own business. I was able to put our children through education. One of them at university level, the other one yet to enter university, and the younger one is still in high school. I was grateful to God, although life hasn't been so easy, but I saw a brighter future compared to where we were when they kicked us out. Fast forward to 10 years. I was at my shop and I saw a very familiar figure someone who looked exactly like my late husband that I buried 10 years ago. At first, I thought it was a ghost. I was in shock. I was scared. And I looked. But then he spoke to me. And he said, I'm back. Please forgive me. I was even more confused, wondering what exactly he's talking about, wondering what exactly is going on and why he's telling me this. He sat me down and he started confessing. He said he was never dead. He impregnated a young girl. The family of this young girl forced him to marry her. He knew that that would break me because we were already suffering. So he had to fake his death so that he could move to a different city with this girl and start a new family. He arranged with his family so that they will sell the house that we built together. The farmlands, he sold all of that so that he could use to start with his new family. I didn't even know what to be more shocked about. Was it the news that he's telling me now? The fact that he faked his death? Or him having a new family? I really do not know. I sat there quiet. I didn't even know what to say. Then I asked him, why is he back here? He said, this girl took everything. She lied. She wasn't even pregnant. And she ran away with the money. He tried to hustle. But then things weren't working out. And his brothers, his sisters, his mum and dad told him how life was good for me and my children. So he thought he would have a second chance and he came crawling back to me. He started begging, he pleaded me to forgive him, that he still loves me and he wants us to carry on from where we left off. Are you joking? Are you kidding me? You want to carry on? The tears, the heartache, the betrayal. You left us on the streets and you telling me to give you a second chance to just carry on where we left off. Where did we leave off? I ask him. Where we left off is I buried my husband. And the person right before me isn't my husband. So please leave me alone.